Francis addresses the crowds outside St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, urging healthcare for all, vaccines for the poor, and lamenting many conflicts around the world. Catalonia reimposes a nighttime curfew along with other restrictions on gatherings and businesses to fight a surge in COVID-19.
30 years on, Russians voice mixed feelings about Mikhail Gorbachev's resignation and the end of the Soviet Union.
Pope France uses Urbi et Orbi, Christmas address from St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, to argue for healthcare for all, vaccines for the poor, and the resolution of various conflicts. Specifically, this year the pontiff lamented violence in Syria, Yemen and Iraq, while also mentioning bursting tensions in Ukraine and Ethiopia. He said, "God is with us, grant health to the infirm, and inspire all men and women of goodwill to seek the best ways possible to overcome the current health crisis and its effects. Open hearts to ensure that necessary medical care and vaccines in particular are provided to those peoples who need them the most. Repay those who generously devote themselves to caring for family members, the sick and the most vulnerable in our midst." This year, crowds were reduced due to the ongoing pandemic, although they were larger than last year when the Pope broadcast a message from the Apostolic Palace to deter crowds from gathering outside.
Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity held a slightly subdued morning service on Saturday, celebrating the second Christmas under the pandemic. It was led by Patriarch Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the top Catholic clergyman in the Holy Land, and it was attended by hundreds of churchgoers. In pre-pandemic times, thousands of pilgrims and tourists from around the world celebrated in the church and the adjacent Manger Square.
Catalonia, home to the city of Barcelona, reimposed a nighttime curfew from Christmas Eve lasting for 15 days to fight a record surge in COVID-19 infections. A raft of other restrictions were also implemented, which will affect the community's 7.7 million people and hamper New Year's celebrations. This bar owner says it's very complicated because with the situation, tourists will no longer come to Barcelona. Everything is cancelled. We've had a good night for now because we've only had these new restrictions for 2 days. But now it's going to get worse, and I'm very afraid of not being able to have a normal 31st or end of the year. Spain had hoped for a relaxed, festive Christmas, since 80% of its population of 47 million were vaccinated. But the incredibly fast spread of the Omicron variant is starting to put pressure on hospitals, with Catalonia having a quarter of all admittances in Spain.
At least 13 people died after a migrant boat capsized off the coast of Greece. It's the third accident with loss of life in as many days, with at least 27 people confirmed to have died in Greek waters this week alone. The sinking scum as people smugglers favour a more perilous route from Turkey to Italy, avoiding Greece's heavily patrolled Aegean islands. A humanitarian ship carrying a group of 114 people rescued in the Mediterranean more than a week ago has been directed to the Sicilian port of Trapani. The organization running the Ocean Viking boat welcomed the news. A doctor on board explained how people feared spending Christmas abandoned.
Where we are stranded at sea with 114 people that we rescued over a week ago from a vessel in distress. Amongst these survivors, we have 2 newborns who are facing spending their first Christmas with us here on board, and their mothers who have faced death and are continuing to suffer with us on board. As per maritime law, a rescue is only complete when the survivors have been disembarked in a place of safety.
More than 200 migrants rescued by another humanitarian boat, the CI4, were allowed to disembark in the port of Pozzallo in Italy on Friday. In total, the German vessel has saved more than 1,400 people in distress at sea over the past year.
Mikhail Gorbachev's resignation as president of the Soviet Union brought an end to a communist empire that had shaped world history for nearly 70 years. But today, 3 decades later, Russians look back with decidedly mixed feelings. One pensioner said that life was good under the Soviet Union. We lived well, peacefully, quietly, everything was fine. And then came just traitors, so to speak. Gorbachev ruined the Union, Yeltsin the drunkard helped. I know that my parents were very interested in it, and it left a mark on them. But I'm a citizen of modern Russia now, and before you told me, I didn't even know about that date. On Friday, Gorbachev summed up his feelings now by saying that Washington grew arrogant and self-confident after the Soviet Union collapsed, and that led to the expansion of the NATO military alliance.
On December 25, 1991, the Soviet red flag was lowered over the Kremlin forever.
Я прекращаю свою деятельность на посту президента СССР.
Pavel Palashenko worked as Mikhail Gorbachev's interpreter from 1985. Currently, he is the head of international and media relations at the Gorbachev Foundation and advisor to Mikhail Gorbachev. Mr. Palashenko shared with Euronews his side of the fall of the USSR 30 years ago.
We published a book under the editorship of Mikhail Gorbachev called "The Union Could Have Been Preserved." Its main idea is that it was impossible to keep the Soviet Union in its former form, and now that is especially clear. When the country's leadership realized this, it decided to take the path of signing a new treaty with the republics, where the republics themselves decided what powers they would have and what they would voluntarily delegate to the Union Centre. I believe that this was the right path. Conflicts, wars between republics, what we are witnessing now, I think, would have been much less likely.
Фактически войны между республиками, то, что мы видим сейчас, я думаю, было бы уже гораздо менее вероятно.
What are the main reasons for the fall of the USSR?
There were two main blows, the August coup d'etat and the Belevej Accords. These are the two main reasons. Of course, the desire of the republics to build their own nation-states played a role. The diverse nature of the republics that made up the Soviet Union played a role. It's very difficult to keep together such a heterogeneous group of republics, such as Estonia or Turkmenistan. But nevertheless, I think that in some shape or form, it was still possible to keep most of the republics together.
Critics say that one of the reasons for the collapse of the Soviet Union was the delay in the implementation of economic reforms. How can you interpret this criticism of Mikhail Gorbachev?
I think that over the past 30 years we've become convinced that economic reforms are extremely difficult, a very difficult, very slow business, and therefore those who criticize him for not being able to do this in 3, 4, 5 years, they are mistaken. Although there is certainly some truth, economic difficulties certainly played a role in the decline of Gorbachev's popularity and in the desire of the republics to climb out of this situation on their own.
Kosovo has introduced rolling 2-hour blackouts due to an overloaded system, according to the electricity distributor, who are now calling for maximum savings to be made. A unit malfunction at the country's main coal power plant compounded normal winter demand surges, necessitating costly imports. Local production now only meets a third of consumption needs.
In the state of Kentucky, a team of volunteers has ensured families hit 2 weeks ago by a string of tornadoes have something to celebrate Christmas with. In the town of Mayfield, the volunteers have served over 30,000 meals since the disaster struck. At least 79 people lost their lives in the tornadoes overnight on December the 10th.